Hi friends, we have about 9 more chapters of Night Gardener to go and really only 2 more weeks of school. So what I wanted to do is, since we're reading about Night Gardener, I thought I'd come out to my day garden and read to you outside for a little while. So I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're listening and not missing a moment of what's happening right now. When we left off, Molly was going into the tree room with the key with the 2 men that had come to the Windsors' home to obviously collect money and things right as the Windsors were exiting. So I'll read just a little bit from the last page and then read as much as I can. We're outside, so the birds will add to this, I hope, and we'll enjoy the outdoor weather together. Here we go. When they reached the top of the stairs, Stubbs took the key and slid it into the lock. "After you." He tipped his hat and swung the door wide. Molly took a breath and stepped into the room. Kip watched his sister disappear behind the green door, the 2 thugs right behind her. The door swung shut with a violent slam. He didn't know why she was showing those men the tree room, but he could tell from her face that she had a plan. It was the same look when she got when telling a story. "Did she mean those things Penny said about not caring for us?" "My sister cares more than you'll ever know." Kip smiled at her, trying to ignore the pain shooting up his left side. When the men had tied him up, they had been especially rough on his leg. "We just have to trust her." Master Windsor had managed to move next to his wife and was now holding her hand, whispering things in a calming tone. "I hope you're right," he said, "because the moment those 2 learn about that tree, what it does, there'll be no stopping them from killing us all." Kip looked at the quickly darkening sky outside. "Even if they don't, when the night gardener gets here, we'll all be done for." "What do you think they're all doing up there?" Alistair said, adjusting his weight. "Why is it so quiet?" Kip stared at the closed door. "I don't know. Maybe the tree's not working because there's 3 of them inside." And he was cut off suddenly by the sound of screams. Kip couldn't tell at first if they were screams of pain or joy. Then the door burst open and the fat one appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching little sheets of white paper. "Promissory notes," he shouted, raining them down over the banister. "Hundreds of them." He jabbed a finger in Master Windsor's direction. "Broke indeed, you old cad." He gave a whoop and a joy and ran back into the room. "What's a promissory note?" Kip said. Alistair stared at the papers scattered across the floor. "It's money. A lot of money." "I want to see." Penny scooted herself towards one of the fallen slips of paper. "Don't touch it, either of you." The command came from Master Windsor. "We're done taking things from the tree." Kip listened to the men whooping and laughing like children inside the room. Whatever his sister was planning, she had better do it fast. The 2 men appeared on the stairs, arms overflowing with more money. They were nearly skipping as they raced outside, a trail of notes in their wake. Kip watched through the open front door as they stuffed the notes into the cart and ran back into the foyer, breathless with exhilaration. The fat one grabbed an overturned trunk and emptied its contents on the floor. "Last one upstairs is a rotten egg." They thundered up the staircase, pushing and shoving to get to the first room. Kip watched the tall one taking the stairs 3 at a time. A smile crept across his face. "Molly, you little sneak." "I don't see how this is funny," Master Windsor said. "Then you weren't looking close enough." Kip nodded towards the room. His knife was missing. Molly wrapped her fingers around the handle of the stolen knife, like pressing the blade up against her rope. She knew she would have to act carefully. The rope was thick, and she could only make the smallest sawing motion without being detected. Fig and Stubbs ran around her, raking heaps of paper out of the knothole to fill a trunk they had brought from downstairs. "Is that the last of it?" Fig said when the knothole had been emptied. "Can't see the bottom." Stubbs reached an arm into the hole, plumbing its depths. "I reckon there might be more down in there, but I can't reach." Makes me think of Herschel and the Hanukkah goblins and his greed, reaching his hand down in the jar. Remember, he couldn't get released? Text-to-text connection. Molly ignored them, concentrating on cutting the rope. Even with a weapon, she knew she couldn't overpower the men. But if she could just get to the hall with her hands free, she might be able to lock them inside the room, giving her enough time to free everyone and make a run for the main road. Fig clapped his hands together. "I got an idea," he said, with the excitement of someone for whom an idea was a very rare thing. "I'll be right back." He ran out the door and thumped downstairs. Stubbs, meanwhile, busied himself with collecting stray notes from the floor. What couldn't fit inside the trunk, he stuffed into his own pockets. "Soon as we've gotten the last scraps out of this here tree, we'll be off," he said by way of conversation, though not before putting old Windsor and the rest out to pasture. Molly felt her heart lurch. You're gonna kill him?" He shrugged. "Can't be helped, I'm afraid. We wouldn't want anyone telling tales about our good fortune now." He shoved a fistful of notes into the waist of his trousers. "I know we promised to take you with us, pet, but I'm afraid the plans have changed. No room for a third person on the car. You understand." The door swung open. "Look what I found in the stables." It was Fig, and he was holding something in both hands. Molly's entire body went cold. "What's that?" she said. "What's it look like? An axe." He hefted the blade in his hand. "We can hack open the hole and crawl right inside." Molly watched as he stomped toward the tree, axe raised over his head. No, listen to me. You cannot hurt the tree. If you hurt the tree, whack." The axe head sank deep into the wood surrounding the knothole. Fig jerked the blade free. Black sap ran down the trunk as thick as molasses. Molly heard a low wind rustling over the grounds. The whole house creaked as the air slid through the cracks in the walls. "You have to stop now," she said. "You don't know what you're doing." "Oh, don't I?" Fig raised the axe over his head and brought it down again. This time, the axe did not strike the wood. Instead, it was stopped just above the tree by a pale, thin hand. A hand connected to an arm clothed in tattered black rags. An arm stretching out from deep inside the tree. Fig let go of the handle. The axe remained where it was, held in place by the spectral hand. Spectral, okay, S-P-E-C-T-R-A-L. We'll look that up. Spectral hand. "What is that?" Stubbs said, inching behind Fig. "It's something wicked," Molly said. She sawed furiously at the final strands of rope, almost free. Wind howled through the room, dragging crumpled notes into the air. Fig and Stubbs were now holding each other. "Maybe we should run," said Stubbs. Fig nodded. "Maybe so." But neither man ran. They were transfixed by the thing before them, unable to move, unable to look away. They watched as a second hand gripped the rim of the knothole. Slowly, impossibly, the night gardener pulled his winding torso out of the tree and unfolded himself until he was standing right before them. Oh my gosh, I would be so scared. He teetered for a moment as if remembering how to stand. A thick smear of black liquid ran down the side of his neck, and he studied the axe still clutched in his hand, still dripping with sap. Molly didn't need to stay and see what would happen next. The moment she felt her knife break through the final strands of her rope, she was on her feet. She scrambled out the door, grabbing the handle. "No, wait!" Stubbs cried, running after her. Molly slammed the door in his face, and she broke the key off in the lock. The man pounded on the door. "Open up, open up, open up!" And a burst of wind shook the door. She heard a violent crash, and then screaming. Molly raced down the staircase, knife in hand, the cries ringing out behind her. "Molly!" Penny shouted. Molly reached the bottom of the stairs, nearly tumbling over herself. "I told you she'd come," Kip said as Molly cut him loose. Another violent gust of wind shook the house, and Molly thought she heard something heavy hit the floor. "That door can't hold long. We have to run. He'll be after us next." Kip massaged his free wrists. "I have an idea. Stay here and I'll help the family. I can slow him down long enough for everyone else to get away." He gripped the wall behind him, trying and failing to stand. "I ain't much good at running now. I may need help." "I'll help you," said a quiet voice behind them. Molly and Kip turned to see Alistair. "You?" she said, unable to hide her surprise. The Windsors were all looking at Alistair now, but Alistair kept his eyes on Kip. "It's my fault you don't have a crutch." He lowered his head. "It's only right that I go with you." Constance sat up, clutching her husband's hand. "Bertie, you can't let him go. Tell him he can't go." The house shook again. Molly heard one final bloody scream upstairs, and then the room went silent. Figs and Stubbs were gone. Molly ran to Alistair's side and cut the ropes around his ankles and hands. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know." He stood tall. "But I want to." He went to Kip and threaded one arm under Kip's shoulder. There was another burst of wind, and the green door flew off its hinges, crashing down the stairs and landing in front of the family. Bertrand gasped, clutching his wife's hand. "It's him! It's the night man," Penny whispered. The whole family watched in horror as the gardener stepped into the hall. He stood at the top of the stairs, the axe still in his hand. His cloak was slick with something wet and dark. Molly didn't think it was sap. Alistair backed towards the open front door, Kip supported by his shoulder. "You said he doesn't like it when you hurt the tree," Alistair said. "Aye," Molly answered. Alistair grabbed hold of a thick branch growing through the wall beside him. "Then he'll hate this." He pulled down on the branch with his full weight. The limb snapped, breaking away from the wall. The gardener flinched, dropping the axe, and he howled in pain, clutching his hand to his chest. "Catch as catch can," Alistair cried, as he and Kip disappeared out the front door. A real character change in Alistair. He wouldn't help the family at all before, and he was completely selfish, even to the point of getting rid of Kip's crutch. But now, even though it's a time of crisis, he's changed. So my question to you is, will this change remain? Or is he just going to care just right now because they're in trouble? We'll see. That's not the whole point of the story, but it's a big part of it. Another huge character change. And before, they would never, ever, ever hurt the tree because they wanted to protect the night gardener. And when in protecting the night gardener, what else were they did they think they were protecting? So let's see. The next chapter is called Hide and Go Seek. Kip staggered down the gravel drive, his arm over Alistair's shoulder, trying to keep a pace. "We need to draw him to the woods on the far side of the island," he said. "We'll be safe there." He knew a place where the tree's roots had not yet grown, a place where the night gardener couldn't reach them. They only had to get there alive. A furious howling swept down the drive, nearly knocking him over. "He's too fast," Kip said, gasping. "We'll never outrun him." "We don't need to." Alistair veered off the driveway onto the lawn. He let go of Kip, who collapsed to the grass. "I'll meet you at the woods," he said, and dropped to his knees. Kip watched him disappear behind a nearby hill. Once in the shadows, he was completely hidden from view. The sky overhead was lit by a harvest moon, which shone bright over the lawn. Kip lay flat on the ground, marshaling his wits. He tried to remember the hours they had spent playing on the lawn. It's just like hide-and-go-seek, he told himself, only he knew it wasn't. This time, getting caught didn't make you it. Getting caught made you dead. He closed his eyes, wishing desperately that he had something to hold, wishing that he had courage. Kip heard a howling behind him. He peered over the top of the hill. The gardener stood in front of the house, searching the grounds. He pressed his body to the grass, making himself as flat as possible. Slowly, he raised up on one elbow and pulled his body a few inches forward. He did this over and over again until he was one hill closer to his destination. The crawling hurt, not just his bad leg, but his whole body. He thought of Molly and the Windsors, and if he didn't reach the woods, they were lost. Kip kept an ear to the air, trying to tell the night gardener's location by the sound of the wind. A shadow slid over his body, and he felt a shiver in the air. He looked up to see the gardener beside him, his lightless eyes scanning the tree line. Kip stared up at him, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. All of a sudden, a rock out of nowhere struck the night gardener's back, and he snarled, turning away from Kip. "Over here!" shouted a voice. Alistair appeared from behind a nearby hill. He blew a raspberry. How'd you like that? And then he disappeared into the grass. The gardener stormed after him, a cyclone of leaves in his wake. He could hear the gardener searching the lawn where Alistair had been. He grabbed a rock next to him, pulled himself upright, and threw the rock as hard as he could. It was a perfect shot. The night gardener's hat tumbled from his head. Kip let out a triumphant laugh and then dropped down. By the time the gardener reached the spot, Kip was already gone. The two boys slowly worked their way along the lawn, throwing rocks as they went. The gardener raced from the hill to hill, enraged and confused. Kip grinned, feeling a thrill that was altogether new to him. He and Alistair were working as a team, doing something that neither of them could have accomplished alone. Kip saw a row of moonlit trees just ahead. Somehow, impossibly, he had made it. He heard a snarling sound as a gust of wind knocked him backwards. He rolled over to see the gardener racing toward him, his clothes tattered, a halo of angry leaves swirling around him. "Alistair," Kip called, trying and failing to pick himself up. Kip saw movement from the corner of his eye. "Run!" Alistair shouted, grabbing hold of his arms. Kip felt his body jerk across the ground as the two of them staggered into the woods. And now I have to stop because of the gardener next door.